So I am, if this is your first time here, I'm Deland Barkman. I get to be the pastor of Pansy Chapel, and I love it. One of my favorite things to do is actually to speak God's Word Sunday mornings, and I love that as well. Ryan, you can come on up. Today we have a treat. We have Ryan Rempel coming to speak with us today. He is from Give the Word. Have you guys, anybody heard of the program, organization, mission, I'm not sure what you call it, Give the Word? A couple of you, right? So if you listen to CHBN, I'm sure you've heard about Give the Word on the radio. The Bibles that we've been using in the past for to give away or evangelism, right? We've got the Thirst Quencher Bibles, and we've got an NLT New Believers Bible there as well. Those Bibles all come from that mission, Give the Word. And so not too long ago, a month or two back maybe, I had a chance to sit down and have coffee with Ryan. And I realized really quick, it was so good. It was, if you have experienced that when you get together and you meet somebody for the first time and you just recognize the Holy Spirit has done so much work in that person's life, and it's just, it feels like it's oozing out of them. And remember we talked a couple of weeks ago about your cup is, you're anointed, your head is anointed, and your cup overflows. It was like I could tell Ryan's cup was overflowing, and I'm like, this is so good. I would love for Ryan to come and speak in our church, and so this is what the result of that. And so I'm excited to have him speak, and I don't know, I feel like I can make all kinds of connections. Ryan's from Landmark, lives in Winnipeg, now he's in Pansy, where he should be, and welcome here, Ryan.
Thanks. Morning. I'm a risk taker, and I love a good rush, and there's no bigger rush than coming to speak to an audience unprepared, and that's what I am this morning because, yeah, okay, there we go. I thought I knew exactly what I was going to say, and then, of course, God does what he does and says, no, you're going to actually say a few different things than you want to. So I usually don't like to speak with notes, but now I have to. So that's what I'm going to do. My name is Ryan Rempel. I'm the executive director of Give the Word. I started this ministry about 5 years ago now. And man, if someone would have told me 15 years ago that I would be sharing the gospel and giving away Bibles for a living, I would have laughed them out of the building. And I am so glad that God's plans are not our plans, because my life would have looked very different. And this one's better. I got into ministry about 8 years ago now, and it all started with me sharing my faith. I did it for the first time. I'm a musician. I've been a drummer since I was a little boy, and I got to play in bands and do a lot of touring, and towards the end of my kind of music career, I actually got to play in a worship band at Stony Mountain Penitentiary, playing with inmates there, or for inmates, and I got to spend about half an hour with them afterwards. And getting into a worship band was kind of on the first steps of my journey as a believer. I always knew that God was real, that Jesus was real, but never really made a personal connection with Jesus in my life till I was probably in my early to mid-20s, when I really started to chip off the pieces that just didn't belong in my life and started to pursue what a relationship with God would look like. And so here I am in Stony Mountain Penitentiary going, what in the world do I have to say to these guys? And I found myself sharing my faith journey with these guys and sharing the gospel with them, and I would watch them respond. And I'm thinking to myself, I've missed out. I've missed out on sharing my faith for so long. And here I am sharing my story in a room or a situation which should have been really intimidating, and yet it wasn't. Because I watched these guys just break down these walls and start asking questions, and it was fantastic. Anyways, after that time in my life, I knew that ministry was something that I wanted to be involved in. I ended up becoming the executive director of another Bible ministry in Winnipeg for almost 5 years, and really got to see how the Bible transforms people's lives, that the Bible really is a living word. And I started to get passionate about local outreach and local ministry and wanting to equip people to share the gospel right here at home, starting in our own backyard. And when my time in that ministry came to an end, I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought maybe I'll just go back into sales or I'll find something to do. But give the word kept coming to my mind and to my head. Those 3 words just kept ringing in my ears, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. And so I started thinking, man, do I actually start something? That's terrifying. We have 3 kids and a mortgage to pay for, and that's really uncomfortable. And I think that's where God likes us, is to be uncomfortable. I think. He makes me uncomfortable all the time. But I started to pursue what it would look like to start a ministry from scratch, and I just said, God, if you're in this, provide, and if not, don't. And so I found myself starting this ministry and was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do here. But I was really hoping that God would provide because I needed money. And he did. My first week that I started Give the Word, I went to an insurance company in the city, and where my father-in-law works for, and the owner of the company was there, and I just popped in to say hi to him, and the owner comes up to me and he says, Ryan, I heard you're starting some kind of a ministry. What's that all about? So I kind of told him what I wanted to do, and he's like, wow, that's great. He said, where do you work out of? Where's your office? So, I got nothing. I got my phone and my car. That's my office. Sorry, I'm just going to set my timer here because otherwise I'm going to speak for like 2 hours. So he just goes, well, I think I can help. I said, okay. And he goes, well, I got a brand new building here. Why don't I just donate office and warehouse space to you rent-free? And this was in like a really nice part of the city. And really? I haven't even prayed about that yet, and here you are offering this to me. And so, I took him up on his offer, and I started working in this really nice building. And I got in touch with Tyndale Publishing in Chicago. They own the New Living Translation, and that's the translation I wanted to use. And I contacted them and I said, you know what? I want to make the Bible free and available for people to use for sharing the gospel. I said, what would 10,000 Bibles cost me? And I picked out one that I wanted to use, and they came back and said, well, shipping and taxes in, you're looking at about 80 grand. Okay. That's a lot of money. It was just kind of discouraging, but I thought, you know what? If God's in this, he's going to provide. And got off the phone and went to work and started fundraising. And a couple days later, they phoned me back on Friday of May long weekend. They said, Ryan, we've been talking about what you want to do with Give the Word, and we need to come on board in a bigger way. And so we're actually going to give you these Bibles at our cost and bring them down to $2.38 a copy instead of $8. What? Awesome. Let's do this. And he said, well, there's a catch. These Bibles are currently out of print, and they're going back into a print run very soon. So if you want in on that print run, we'd need your funds within a week. And this is Friday of May long weekend, and I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to raise 24 grand over May long weekend? I don't even have my personal support raised yet. I said, well, I guess this isn't going to happen. And me of little faith. And I walked away from there going, God, if you're in this, provide. And I got on my computer and I sent an email to everybody that helped me get started. Some people that said no, some people that said maybe. And I said, I'm going to shamelessly ask you again. I need 24 grand. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I need that. And my email lit up. And in 5 days, we had almost $30,000. And then it started to hit me that God's in this. God is providing, and I'm not really doing anything to get it other than ask. And so I ordered these Bibles, and I went to a trucking company in the city, and I said, I need 10 skids of Bibles shipped from Chicago to Winnipeg. Can you give me some type of a discount? And they said, yeah, they would. And the owner took me for coffee a couple days later and said, Ryan, we're really on board with this, so we're actually going to do this for free, and we're going to do all your future orders for free. What is going on? I went to a printing company in the city and I said, I need marketing material, I need brochures and business cards, I need a website done. What's my price on that? And so they gave me a price, and I thought, okay, I think I can do that. And I went to go pay the bill, and they said, no bill. We're doing this for free. And Give the Word was 100% operational within a month, and I had zero overhead. How in the world does that happen? God makes it happen. And I'm so glad it happened that way, not just because it was easy for me, but because I dedicated this ministry to God when I started it, and then he showed me it was his. And I will never, ever forget that. And in the last 5 years, we've been able to donate over almost 200,000 Bibles to over 400 ministries across Canada and into Latin America. And God just keeps growing it and growing it and growing it. And where do I see Give the Word in 5-10 years? I have no idea. God has surpassed all of my expectations and all my plans. Why bother making plans? He's going to change them anyway. I'm just going to run with it. And that's what I've been doing, and it's been absolutely amazing. We've now outgrown the free space that we had at the beginning, and we're now working out of the Youth for Christ building downtown, and they've now given us free office and warehouse space there, right in the hub of the city, and it's amazing. This all started because I have a passion for people. I love people. I love building relationships. I love seeing people come to Christ. I love hearing people's stories. I love being able to share my story. And it all started because I have a burden for people that don't know Christ. And I had no idea that I had that burden until much later in life. But I know that God was preparing me to hear people's stories and to share mine through one of the first jobs that I ever had, which was a telemarketer. That was a horrible job. Never, ever have I experienced rejection like I have being a telemarketer. And I started off really horrible at it. And it was all commissions based, and I'm thinking, I hate this so much. I said, how in the world am I going to make any money? Nobody's buying what I have. I was selling long distance plans from AT&T back when there's not many cell phones around. And nobody wanted this long distance plan. And so I was wondering, how am I going to sell this? And so I remember getting on the phone, and on the screen, I could always see the person's name on the screen when I was calling them. So I already knew their name beforehand. And this lady comes on the phone. I think her name was like Fredrickson, her last name. And she said, hi, this is Mrs. Fredrickson speaking. And I said, hi, this is Ryan Fredrickson calling from AT&T. She's like, oh, your last name is Fredrickson. Yeah. She's like, oh, that's neat. There's not many of us around. Yeah, I know. And she let me go through the whole sales pitch with her, and she bought it. I was like, I'm going to try that again. And I started using other people's last names as my last name. And people started talking to me about where they were from and where I was from, and they started sharing their story with me, and I was talking about my fake story, and I was having a blast, and I was killing it. Like, I was like making every sale. And but what I started to really enjoy was hearing people's stories. It was all based on a lie, and I wouldn't ever do that again, probably. But I really enjoyed it. I loved talking to them and hearing where people were from, and it totally kind of took me out of my comfort zone, but I started to like it. And ever since then, I always pursued jobs that dealt with people, building relationships with people. And I still get to do that. Whether I'm working at that kind of a job or not, I get to tell people about Jesus, and I get to share my story and listen to other people's stories. And I don't know about you, but when I used to fly, I fly fairly often, but especially now in ministry, but when I used to fly, I would always just pray and wish for having a seat to myself. It's already squished, and all of a sudden somebody comes and sits beside you, and you're like, seriously, 2 hours with this guy? And I would always pray for a row to myself, and that's completely changed. Now it's like, give me somebody who's a chatterbox, somebody with a sense of humor, somebody that will put up with what I have to say. And I remember getting on a flight to Thunder Bay recently to go speak at a conference, and that's exactly what I prayed before I got on the flight. I just said, God, would you put me beside a chatterbox, somebody with a good sense of humor? And I got on the flight, and I went to my seat, and there was one other guy there, and he's probably in his mid-40s, and he looks at me and he goes, ugh. He's like, "You're not the hot blonde I ordered to sit beside me." And I was like, yes. I was like, "Sorry, man, you're stuck with the bald dude." And we just started talking right away, and I asked where he was from. He said he's from Saskatoon. I asked what he was doing in Thunder Bay, and he goes, "Well, I'm a broadcasting executive, and I'm flying out to Thunder Bay to meet one of our clients." And he said, "I travel a lot." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So I asked him about his job and how he got into that, and people love to talk about themselves. So I just tried to open that up. And he goes, "What are you out here for?" And I just said, "I'm just going to speak at a youth conference." And he goes, what do you talk about at a youth conference?" And I just kind of nonchalantly said, "I'm just kind of talking about how Jesus changed my life and how I'm able to use my story to share the gospel with others, and hopefully I can equip these youth to do the same." And just talking about it like it's no big deal. And he's looking at me like, "What?" He's like, "What do you mean Jesus changed your life?" And I was like, "Yes." And I was able to share my whole testimony with him. And in that testimony, I incorporated the entire gospel in there. And he's looking at me and he's going, "I have never heard that before. This is a 20 or 45-year-old white guy from Saskatoon, and he's never heard that before." I was like, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah, well, I know that Christianity exists and that God and Jesus fit into that somehow, but the way that you talk about it, no, I've never heard that." And he just goes, "This is really interesting timing." He said, I wouldn't consider myself an agnostic and lean towards more of the science and logic of end of things and who's to know what's out there. He's like, "But my dad recently died, and I've been really struggling with where he is. And if he's nowhere, what's the point of anything?" And he said, "This is really good timing. And now you've given me something to think about, so thanks a lot." And he said it sarcastically, in a funny way, a good way. And he says, "Any chance you have like a Bible for dummies?" And I said, "Man, that's the only kind we got." And I was able to give him a Bible, and we kept talking all the way through picking up our baggage, and it was great. And now we're emailing back and forth, and it's awesome. He's not a believer yet, but he's on his way. And who knows? This man, his name is Tyler. Tyler can now never say that he's never known. My job was not to save him, but to make Jesus known in his life. It's addictive. And what's really caused me to seek the importance of sharing my faith is recognizing that we are God's plan A. And he has no plan B. We're it. That responsibility is on us. And my favorite verse to get this point across, is in Romans 10, 13 to 15. I love this series of verses. It says, "Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they've never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless somebody tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? That is why the scripture says, 'How beautiful are the feet of the messengers who bring the good news.'" If we're not talking about it, how are they ever going to hear it? Because there are people living right in our backyard who do not know the gospel. I think we think that they do, but they don't. Just like this Tyler guy. Yes, he knows that Christianity exists, and he knows that Jesus and God are involved in that somehow, but what that looks like, what salvation is, why Christ died for our sins, completely oblivious. And there's really no reason for them to be. Because we are allowed to share the gospel in Canada with no consequence. I did a little bit of a survey of finding out how many evangelical Christians there are in Canada compared to the rest of the population. And it was like, man, if every single Bible-believing Christian shared their faith with about 5 or 6 people, Canada would know about Christ. That seems really doable. And it's not happening. I went online and found some other surveys about what evangelism looks like in Canada. And there was this survey about what Christians actually think about us. And it was really cool. They compiled their 7 top answers that they got when they asked, what do you think about Christians? And here's what they got back. I would like to develop a friendship with a Christian. And when they asked why, one of the comments was, I'm really interested in what exactly they believe. I'd like to find a Christian who'd be willing to spend some time with me, but I wouldn't know who to ask. Second one was, yes, I would actually like to hear about the Bible. The Bible fascinates me, but I don't really know where to go to learn about it. I'd be open to a Christian inviting me to a Bible study somewhere. Number 3, I don't really see much difference in Christians and non-Christians. So what is the difference? Number 4, I'd like to learn to be a better husband, wife, father, mother. One of the comments was, I'm going through some major family issues right now, and I think that my neighbor is a Christian. He seems to really have his life together. Maybe I can swallow my pride and ask him about it, as if it's his job. I'm totally open to a Christian inviting me to their church. I'd like to visit a church, but I'm not comfortable going by myself. What's weird is that I'm 32 years old, and I've never had somebody invite me, even though I have Christians in my life. There's another study out there about evangelism that says this, and I found this really hard to believe at first. It says, did you know that only 5% of Bible-believing Christians are actively sharing their faith? That leaves 95% of us living in our bubble, keeping the greatest news that's ever been given to ourselves. 95%. How in the world do we win this war? Because if only 5% of us are doing this, it's too much. It's too big of a job. We can't do it all. Your pastors can't do it all. The ministries can't do it all. The churches can't do it all. It's too much. It's too big of a job. That's too big of a responsibility. But if we'd all share our faith with like 5 or 6 people, everyone knows. But the Bible's pretty clear on that because it says the harvest is plenty and the laborers are few. So what excuse do we have? What happens if the gospel is not shared? Because the gospel is really only good news if it gets there in time. If it doesn't get there in time, it's useless. And I have a hard time believing that that's what Jesus died for. I took a survey of a church in Calgary. When I heard about that 5%, I was out speaking there to a church of about 350, 400 people. And I said, okay, everybody, I'm not going to do this here today, so don't worry about that. But I said, everybody close your eyes, don't look at each other, and be super honest. I said, who here would say that their faith is the most important thing in their life above anything else? Raise your hands. And almost the entire church raises their hand. I was like, okay, awesome. I said, now really keep your eyes closed and be honest. And I said, who here can say that they are actively engaged in sharing their faith in any capacity during the week? Raise your hands. About 8 or 10 hands went up in a church of 350 people. And I said, open your eyes. I said, here's the numbers. I said, how can we collectively say that our faith is the most important thing to us if we're keeping this to ourselves? because then it's not. I think we want it to be. I think we really want it to be. But it's not, because we talk about what is most important to us. We tend to talk about our families and our work, or the guy that cut you off. The Jets game, Bombers, whatever. We talk about what's most important to us with the people around us. And if we're not talking about our faith, we can't say that it's the most important thing. And I often find myself in that situation as well. There's often days where my faith is not the most important thing because I choose to talk about something else. I get uncomfortable and I shy away from the opportunity that God has put right in front of me, and I walk away and go do something else. Because I decided that something else is more important than that. I remember being at Missions Fest, Vancouver, and this was, about a year ago. And I brought like 500 Bibles with me, and we had our booth set up there at Missions Fest. There's like 10,000 people that walk through there. It's awesome. And it's really cool to be there. But our booth was just like stacked full of Bibles, and everybody would come by and go, "Are these free?" "Yeah, absolutely." "I can just take one?" "Yep, go for it." I said, "But you can't keep it. You have to give it away to somebody that might not have one." Almost everybody put them back. At Missions Fest, you're walking around because you're interested in getting involved in missions, and you're putting this Bible back. And I would always ask them why. So I compiled my own list of the reasons I got back. Well, I wouldn't really know what to say. I never know what to say either. Every conversation is different. "Oh, I'm not actually a missionary." Yes, you are. If you're a believer, you're a missionary. You're either active or inactive, but you are one. Well, I wouldn't know who to give it to. That's the point. Well, people don't actually want to hear about Jesus. Really? So we were created by God for God, and nobody wants to hear about Jesus. How can you even say that? The Bible says, share the gospel, and when necessary, use words. It does not say that. And I haven't read through any of the Gospels where Jesus and his disciples didn't have to use words to get their message across. Well, my life's not good enough to share. It never will be. I'm scared of rejection. So is the rest of the world. I don't want to. That's honest. I don't want to. There is so much joy in sharing your faith, regardless of the response. The happiest believers and the happiest Christians that I know are the ones who are actively engaged in sharing their faith. They are so fired up. And the one good response that you get will fuel all the fire for the rest of the opportunities that you ever take, regardless of the 80% of bad responses that you're going to get. But the bad response that we get here is the word no. When there are people and believers dying for their faith across this world, and our excuse is that we're scared of people saying no, I just picture us being in this on Judgment Day, being in this line where they're asking, why didn't you share your faith? Oh, well, these people were threatening to kill us. Yeah, I know, I understand that. You still should have, but I get it. Well, they were threatening to take away our homes. I would have lost my job. We would have been killed. Well, I was scared they were going to say no. What? If you've ever been in sales or customer service, you will have experienced more rejection than you will have sharing the gospel. Guarantee you. Because we are designed for this story. We are designed to hear this story. We're designed to accept this story of salvation. So what else does the Bible say about it? The Great Commission. The Great Commission is one of the last things that Jesus commanded us to do before his ascension back into heaven. The last thing and instruction that he gave us. And if this is the last thing that he told us, he probably put some importance to it. And I know we probably all know it, but I'm just going to read it. Jesus told his disciples, "I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." He empowered his disciples and gave instruction to his disciples to do this. And his disciples were not these perfect pastor ministry leaders. These were guys just like you and I, rotten to the core like we all are, with flaws and screw-ups and everything in between. And I highly doubt that all 12 of these disciples were just these type A outgoing personalities either. I think it was a pretty mixed bag for Jesus to get his message across that you all can do this. You all have to do this. Because we're plan A, and there is no plan B. And I think we often take the Great Commission as the Great Suggestion or the Great Omission. And I mean, I get it, but why do we treat this command different from all the others? We have no problem following the other commands. Don't commit adultery, don't lie, don't steal, don't do this and don't do that. Oh no, I would never do that. Go and share the gospel. That's uncomfortable. Why do we treat that as something that we don't really have to do? I heard a pastor speak on that a while ago, which really convicted me over again of that. And he talked about not sharing the gospel actually being a sin. You know you're supposed to do something. You know it. Because you've been asked to, and yet we don't. And somehow we've gotten it into our minds and in our hearts that that's okay. And we tend not to think about it. And I'm speaking to myself here too, because I'm just like you. I don't have any special gifts or talent that make me some amazing evangelist. It's uncomfortable for me every time. I have nerves about doing it every time. And yet I've never walked away from sharing my faith wishing I hadn't. Because there's joy in it. Half that gift is for us. Being obedient. Getting to share that good news that we say is the best news. Everyone is empty. Everyone is lonely. Everyone is guilty. And everyone is afraid to die. Everyone. So everyone needs to hear this. 1 Peter says, always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have. Actually, I'm going to back up. There's a guy named Todd who came to our office one day, and he brought his Bible with him, and he came into my office door, and he just says, in kind of this bold, intimidating voice, he said, "I need to know what you do here." I was like, okay. So I told him what we did, and he just goes, "Well, thank you." He said, "This saved my life." I said, "How's that?" He goes, "Well, this Bible that I have has the information of your ministry on the back, and so that's why I'm here. But he said, I picked up this Bible actually at Value Village while I was buying some clothes for my brother. And he said, I found this book. I thought it was just a book. He said, I love to read. He said, I'll read anything. So I just picked it up and brought it home, and I had no idea it was a Bible. But I brought it home with me, and I started reading, and I realized that I was reading through the Bible for the first time in my life. And he said, it's as if every word was written for me, because this answered all my questions and all my doubts and all my problems. There was an answer for it. And he said, I read through the whole New Testament in 3 days. And the only conclusion that I could come to at the end of this story was that I needed to accept Christ, and I just want to let you know that I've done that. Amazing. Amazing. He was 42 at the time that this happened, successful salesman in Winnipeg, had a family, and he said, I'm now the first believer in my family, my whole extended family, that I can think of because of this book. And he took me for coffee one day. We started this friendship, and he moved now, so we've kind of lost touch a little bit. But he took me for coffee, and he said, I got a bone to pick with you. He said, have you known about Jesus your whole life? I was like, oh boy. I said, yep. And he said, can you help me understand something? He said, why do Christians like you rob people like me of eternity by keeping your mouths shut? I had no answer for him. He said, I almost died in a drunk driving accident a while back. I should have died. Almost did. I don't know why I didn't. But I now know where I would have gone if I would have died. And he said, and that would have been on all of you. Because it's been 42 years and nobody has ever said anything to me about this until I went and picked up this book and had to read it for myself. He said, I don't get it. He said, I realized that there was 12 other people in my family, or in my workspace, that were Christians. And they're congratulating me at work that I've become this believer because I'm talking about it all the time. And all I could think about was, how dare you keep this from me? And he said, I realized that I might have not been receptive to it. He said, but why wouldn't you try? I had no excuse, and I had no good answer for him. But it's really, that conversation has fueled the opportunities that I take now. And now I really recognize when I miss them. And it hurts. But it's caused me to take more. I want to play a video for you here. I hesitated doing this video because I really didn't want it to be about Ryan and what Ryan does. Because really it is nothing special. Oh my goodness. I'm going to turn that off. It was just an uncomfortable situation that I drove by and decided to say something. And here's what happened.
My name is Ryan Rempel. I'm the director for Give the Word Ministries here in Winnipeg. We give away Bibles and we encourage people to share their faith, and it's something I try and do, but I was driving down the street one day and just doing some errands for work, and I saw this person sitting on a bench, and God just told me to approach this person.
I was sitting there thinking, I guess I was in my own mind, just a thought. He drives up. All of a sudden I hear, excuse me. I turn around, I looked up, and there he was.
And I had $10 in my wallet, and God just said, you need to go give it away. And so I did that.
I says, no thank you. I don't want it. It's okay. No, I have to do this. I felt a nudge.
And I gave it away, and I knew she was confused as to why I was giving it away, and so was I. But I knew I needed to obey that little nudge that God gave, and so I gave it away. And then God said, you're not done yet. You need to pray for this person. And so I said, I'm sorry to bug you again, but can I pray for you? And she welled up with tears, and she said, I have cancer. And so I sat down beside her and I prayed for her. And I don't even remember what I said, but I prayed. And, she gave me this big hug, and she turned around and walked inside, and I went on my way, and I thought, God, this can't be the end of this story. There's got to be more. So I went back to my office, and I grabbed a Bible, and I wrote a letter with some of my testimony, my story in there, and the message of salvation with my phone number. And I said, God, you got to connect me with this person again. I don't know how, but you got to do it. And so I went back to that apartment building that I saw her at, and I sat there for about an hour. And she didn't come back out. And I went back again that evening and sat there again. She didn't come back out. I went back the next morning, sat there again. She didn't come back out. And so I thought, well, maybe this isn't going to happen. And I went to the store nearby to buy a couple things for my dad. And I went to the checkout line, and there she was in the checkout line.
He says, please don't go away. I have something for you. And I looked at him. I said, okay. He gave me this Bible. I wasn't expecting it. I says, thank you very much. What is this for? It's for you. I had to give this to you. Then, Maureen, I fully believe in Jesus Christ. I believe just as Jesus says in the Bible, anyone who believes in their heart that I am the Son of God and that I died for your sins will be saved. I read this letter and I cried at home. I thought nobody would do something like that.
And about a week later, she called me and said, Ryan, I've been reading that letter and that Bible every day, and this has changed everything. And I just knew that I wanted her to get into community with like-minded people and with the church that would just love on her and accept her. I wanted her to feel that, and so I invited her to church. I've learned that there's never a bad time or a bad opportunity to reach out. Usually I find that it's when it's most uncomfortable, that's when you need to do it. And so I've just really found that no matter how uncomfortable it feels, just reach out and love on people and just watch God work. It's amazing.
Maureen died last Christmas. And I can't imagine what the rest of her life would have looked like if I would have just kept driving, which was actually the thing that I wanted to do. Just keep driving. I'm so glad I stopped. And so glad I worked through that discomfort of what I was going to say, because I really had no idea what I was going to say to her. I just let God do the talking and open my mouth. It's why we have the Holy Spirit, because we don't know what to say and we don't know what to do. We don't know how the situation is going to unfold. That's why we have the Holy Spirit. Let Him do it. Just be available. It works. It really works. And 1 Peter says, always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have. I always wondered why nobody asked me about the hope that I have. And I realized that it's not their job to ask me. It's my job to tell them. And then they'll ask. Because I always wanted somebody to go, Ryan, you're a nice guy. You must be a Christian. I'd love to be one too. How do I do that? And honestly, that's kind of the opportunity that I was waiting for. And I always wondered why Jesus never gave me opportunities to share my faith. When really it was my job to seek people out. My job to let God just put people before me. And I realized that I actually have opportunities every single day. I don't ever have to ask God for an opportunity. He already gives them to me. I can either face them head on or I can walk away. And you know what? Still more often than not, I walk away. It's my sinful nature. It's me choosing something else over God. But I'm learning every day and every week to take more of those opportunities. And I'm never going to be perfect at it. I never will be. But I don't want to get to the end of my life saying I have never been instrumental in leading somebody to Christ. That I have never played a part in somebody's story. That I don't want to go through my whole life getting to the end going, I never really allowed myself to be used. I don't want that. because we only get one shot. We can't share the gospel in heaven. That's done. So how do we do this? How do you get somebody to ask you about the hope that you have? Well, reading through the Gospels, I noticed a common theme and a common trend of how Jesus and the disciples carried out their mission is before they ever really talked about the gospel and about salvation, they almost always preceded their message with an act of service, love, or a miracle, which gave them the permission to tell them why, which caused the people that they were in front of to go, why? Why are you doing that? I want that. So I thought, what would it look like if I put that into practice in my own life? What if I would try and go do something so amazing for somebody that it would make them ask me, why would you do that for me? Go to a total stranger and do something huge for them, big enough so that they'll ask you, why would you do that for? You don't even know me. Now they've given permission for you to tell them. It works. Who'd have thought? And it's fun. Super fun. If you can sacrifice your time, your money, and your comfort, you can be very effective at sharing the gospel. Because sharing your faith is going to cost you something. Jesus talks about that plenty, that following me is going to cost you something. There is a cost, and I don't think we've really grasped that cost thing, because it's never really cost us anything. And in Canada, it won't really cost you a lot until you start sharing your faith. And then you're going to realize it actually takes resources and time and my comfort to share the gospel. If you can let go of those three things, you will have piles of opportunities. And it becomes addictive. Walking down the street just going, man, who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to say something to? What does God have for me today? And it's scary all at the same time, but it's fun, and there's joy in it. Penn Jillette once said this. If you don't know who Penn Jillette is, he's an actor, he's a magician, he's a comedian in the States. He's got a show in Vegas. Really popular guy. He's super funny, but he's an atheist. And he's very evangelical about his atheism. Loves to talk about it, loves to debate, isn't scared to say something. He's one-upped on me. He probably loves talking about his atheism more than I like talking about my faith. That's kind of backwards. But I watched a video of him once. He talks about after one of his performances, this guy walks up to him and says, I really loved your performance and love what you do, and I wanted you to have this as a gift. And he said, this guy handed me a Bible, knowing that I'm an atheist, knowing that I reject that book. And he said, I respect that man because he believes in that enough that he would still share this with me. And he said, the only Christian that I can respect is a Christian that shares their faith. Because if Christians actually believe that there's a heaven and a hell, how much do Christians actually have to hate someone not to share that message with them? This guy's an atheist, and God is using that guy for kingdom building, and he doesn't even know it. That video has been played at so many churches and conferences, and it's a great video. But it's true. How much do I actually have to hate people to keep this to myself? So my question, or my challenge to you is, will you go get uncomfortable? Will you go sacrifice some of your time, and will you go and sacrifice some of your comfort? If you haven't done it before, just do it once. Do it once and you'll do it again. And so I gave everybody here one of these, and my challenge to you is before the year is done, go get super uncomfortable somewhere. Go ask if you can pray for somebody. Go and do something huge for somebody. Go and pay for somebody's grocery bill and standing in front of you at the grocery line in an unfamiliar spot. Well, people probably aren't going to know you. Go approach somebody sitting on a bench. Go do something big and out of the ordinary before the end of the year and ask about their story. And then share yours. And give this away. But you showing Christ to them is going to give you the permission to give this away. Because if you just run to your neighbor's mailbox and chuck it in there and run away super fast so they don't see you, not super effective. I've done that before and got caught. And then what? But would you go do that before the end of the year? And then what I want you to do is pick up one of our brochures. Most of you already have one. If not, pick one up at the back. There's probably a few left there. And write to us and share us your story about what you did. Don't have to include your name. We'll never use your name. But we'd love to be able to share your story to encourage the next church, to equip them to do that too. So what I'm going to do, I love doing this. If you're going to commit to doing this, hold it up. This is going to be good. Now Delon can see all of you holding it up. Accountability. So my challenge to you is that you would make Jesus known in your life. And if we can all do that, we can start raising that 5% to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 100. Because it's super doable. You just got to go do it. That's it. If you want to support us, you can. There's cards at the back that you can support us financially. Like I said, we send out about 50,000 Bibles per year out. This next year, we're anticipating about 75,000 that are going out. And it's a lot of work to make that happen. And we'd love to have you a part of Give the Word and a part of our support team. So if you're looking for something extra to do, awesome. If it's going to take away from something you're already doing, don't do it. God will provide. He always does. He always has. Thank you for having me here this morning. I love being able to share my passion with you guys. I hope it's rubbed off on you. And see you again.